U.S. anti-war student protests and police raids shake up schools' graduation plans. Do you know it's that time of the year, that time of the school year at least, when graduation happens, all right? But with all these protests that are going on at all these different schools, because last time we spoke about the protests, I believe we were just talking about Columbia in New York, but it's actually broken out in other schools in New York and other schools all across the country. These protests, these anti-Israel protests, these anti-state of Israel protests, these, you could even say pro-Palestinian, because that's what a lot of them are. They're pro-Palestinian. They're not just anti the state of Israel. They are pro-Palestinian. All right, so we'll go ahead and get into this. This is an article on Reuters. Y'all know I like Reuters. You can probably find the same stories on other sites, but I like Reuters. They're fairly credible, and they're fairly not centrist, but they are fairly objective. No article is ever going to be completely objective. No perspective is ever going to be completely objective. It's all going to have some kind of bias, but Reuters does a pretty good job of keeping it mostly fact driven, unless they're opinion pieces, in which case it'll tell you it's an opinion piece. So we'll go ahead and get into it. All right, May 3rd, that's today. Ahead of the University of Michigan's commencement on Saturday, the school has trained staff volunteers in how to mitigate disruptions. All right, so that's, quell these protests. A change from the usual duties of guiding guests around campus and showing them to their seats. Right, so they said, look, y'all may have to smack a couple students. All right, everyone facilitating the University of Illinois' commencement the following weekend will have undergone similar special training. So it's not just a University of Michigan thing. This is all over the country. They're teaching people how to smack around these protesters. And I'm being facetious saying smack them around and stuff, but that's not far from what they're teaching them to do. At schools like the University of Southern California and Cal Poly Humboldt in Northern California, leaders have canceled or moved key events off campus altogether, right? So in some cases, the schools say, hey, look, since all these protests are going on at the campus, we're just going to hold graduations and other similar events off campus, all right? What are typically joyful ceremonies in which robed students cross stages to accept diplomas will have a different feel this month at many universities where pro-Palestinian protests and police crackdowns have upended the final days of the school year. All right, and we talked about last time when we talked about these protests or at Columbia, rather, that the police have been cracking down on these protesters, but these protesters have not really been violent. All right, these protesters have just been, essentially what some of these schools consider to be in the way, and so they just call in the police to come and arrest them for, they're not breaking any laws or anything. And even the police said, look, they've been complicit, they haven't been violent with us at all, right? That's what we read, at least with Columbia. All right. In recent days, students across the U.S. have rallied or set up tents at dozens of universities to protest Israel's war on Gaza. Demonstrators have called on President Joe Biden, who has supported Israel, to do more to stop the bloodshed in Gaza and demanded schools divest from companies that support Israel's government. Reuters asked 20 U.S. colleges and universities where major protests have ensued how the demonstrations had affected commencement plans, right? So this isn't even saying these are all the schools where protests have broke out. These are just the ones that Reuters asked. They asked 20 of them. They was like, well, let's just select 20 of them that are all across the country. All right, it's happening again at many schools all across the country. All right, and this said where major protests, or not even none of the minor ones. All right, excuse me. Of the 11 that responded, right? So 9 just didn't even call back, didn't even write back. Of the 11 that responded, only 3 did not expect to alter their security protocols for the event, right? So the overwhelming majority of schools where these protests are happening, at least from what we can tell from this data that Reuters, acquired, they're, either moving them off site or moving the graduation off site, or they are, up in security, around the events. Some university leaders have called in riot police, wielding batons and flashbang grenades to disperse and arrest hundreds of protesters, citing a paramount need for campus safety, even as civil rights groups have decried such tactics as unnecessarily violent violations of free speech. You see that right there? So you have free speech here in America until you don't. Understand that thing. You have free speech until you don't. Until you say something that they want you to shut up about. That's when they'll just, it doesn't matter to them. They don't care about free speech. Maybe you have free speech whenever everybody agree with you, but you start saying things that people disagree with, and then there goes your free speech. All right? Understand that thing. The anti-war protests have been staged in response to Israel's offensive in Gaza, which it launched after a Hamas attack on October 7th that Israel says killed 1,200 people. Israel has killed over 34,000 people in retaliation. You see that right there? So it's not just about getting their get back, all right? What they said, 1,200 people that was killed in the October 7th attack. If you know anything about that attack, you know that, there was some friendly fire by the state of Israel, so you can't even say Hamas killed all those 1,200 people. Even so, the state of Israel has killed more than 30 times that amount, or just about 30 times that amount, most of which, I ain't gonna say most of which, about half of which have been innocent people, all right? Some even say children. All right, about 40% is what they say, about 40%. I would say even over half have been innocent people. I think the number around innocent people is like 90s and then 90% just civilian casualties. But children is around 40%. That may be outdated data, but that's what I've heard at least. According to Gaza health authorities, and flattened the Palestinian territory. Right, they just carpet bombed the whole region. All right, they started in the north, started carpet bombing the north, and then just continued on to the southern part of Gaza. All right. At Columbia University, the epicenter of the student protest movement, where New York police cleared a 2-week-old encampment by arresting dozens of peaceful protesters on Tuesday. So they came in and arrested more people since the last time we talked about it. All right. President Namat Minouche Shafik acknowledged in a Wednesday statement that many were concerned about the university's plans for its May 15th commencement. We look forward to sharing more information about preparations that are underway soon, her statement said. Meanwhile, schools that have avoided more explosive confrontations with protesters by allowing encampments to remain on campus or agreeing to consider divestment demands are under less strain ahead of their graduation celebrations, right? So people who have, taken into consideration what the protests were about, they're not as concerned with security measures. It's only the schools who don't want to listen to the protesters, because protests don't come out of nowhere. All right, they never do. They never just come from nothing. It's usually some underlying problem that the protesters want to resolve. If you deal with that problem, the protesters will go away. That's kind of the whole point of protesting. All right. It says University of Minnesota interim president Jeff Ettinger announced on Thursday that protesters had agreed to end their encampment in exchange for an opportunity to discuss divestment with the Board of Regents, and a promise that the school will not pursue disciplinary action against them, right? Because that's one of the major things that we talked about was happening in Columbia. I don't know if we ever talked about it, but yeah, the students getting doxxed, students getting punished, expelled, suspended, whatever the case may be. The Student Coalition has agreed they will not organize disruptions at upcoming final exams and commencements, allowing those activities to continue as planned, Ettinger said in a campus-wide email. Because it's just pretty much the same thing as what has been happening. The protesters have not been getting violent. That just has not been happening. But police are being called on the protesters and arresting them anyway, just because the university wants them gone. All right. So on the disruption mitigation, for some schools, the additional security measures for graduation ceremonies have invited yet more controversy. More than 300 University of Michigan faculty, staff, and alumni signed a letter protesting the disruption mitigation training for commencement volunteers from the school's student life department, saying staff should not be asked to quell people trying to express free speech in a place where free speech is permitted, right? So they're training the staff to do this, to, as I said at the beginning of the article, smack some students around a little bit. And I said it facetiously, but a lot of the staff is not, it's not sitting well with them. They don't agree to what they're being trained to do. They're like, well, I mean, they are exercising their free speech. Aren't we supposed to have free speech here in America? And university's like, nah, they ain't got free speech. Not here, not now. All right? Not like this. They got free speech when they're repeating what we tell them. They got free speech whenever we agree with them. But when we disagree with them, no, they ain't got free speech to do that. The volunteers have been trained to identify and de-escalate problematic behavior, including prolonged yelling, stomping, random yelling / shouts against someone or about current issues. See, even that, shouting and yelling about current issues is not, like, that's not against free speech. You know, that's not violent. That's actually something that is permitted under free speech, or it's supposed to be, right? But, you know, I'm saying all this with a heavy asterisk on it because, again, you have free speech in America till you don't, all right? And holding signs silently that block the view of others. So even if somebody like stands behind your sign or can't see around your sign, that's apparently disruptive behavior. According to a copy of the training slides seen by Reuters. So naturally, some of the staff is like, look, this is violating free speech. We don't want to take part in this. We're not going to do anything to these students. The training instructed volunteers to issue 2 verbal warnings to hecklers and then have public safety and security officers escort them from the event if they persist. Ann Elias, a training manager for the university's library services, was not asked to complete the training, but helped write and collect signatures for the letter protesting it. I have real concerns with asking any staff member to engage in any type of policing behavior, even gently reminding people when they're allowed to speak and how they're allowed to speak, she said, right? Because she's not a police officer. Even if she was, she believes in free speech, at least to this degree, right? A spokesperson for the university said the school's aim was not to suppress free expression or peaceful protest, but rather to limit significant disruptions, ensure safety, and support a successful event worthy of the achievements of the university's extraordinary graduates, right? So obviously that's a PR statement, but everybody who limits free speech or limits any rights, anybody who limits any rights, anybody who tries to take away your rights will say they're doing it in the name of safety, right? That's the whole thing about the Patriot Act, right? The Patriot Act after September 11th limited American rights in a lot of ways, as in like basically gave the NSA the permission to spy on all of us, right? Which they're doing currently with all our electronics. This is not unknown information. Snowden blew the lid off this like a decade and a half ago, right? But that's what the Patriot Act ended up doing. They said they're doing it in the measure of, in the, what does it say right here? To ensure safety, right? You know, they started going through everybody's emails, started giving themselves access to everybody's like personal information that happened online. And that's just fact at this point. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's just what the NSA does. And again, Snowden blew the lid off this in maybe 2012, I think, maybe 2013. It was at least a decade ago. But yeah, I'll go ahead and finish this out because it's just another little couple of paragraphs. The university, so USC's controversial cancellation. The University of Southern California has gone further than any other U.S. university surveyed by Reuters, calling off its main stage graduation ceremony last week after canceling the valedictorian speech by a Muslim student who said she was silenced by an anti-Palestinian hatred. You see that right there? So obviously they're saying it's anti-Palestinian hatred, but it was a case of like, look, if we give her the floor, she's going to say some stuff that we don't want her to say, so we're not going to give her the forum. Instead, graduates are invited to an evening family graduate celebration in the Los Angeles Coliseum featuring drone shows, fireworks, surprise performances, and the school's marching band, according to a statement USC released on Friday. The school said in April that new safety measures this year, such as additional screening, would increase the processing time for guests substantially. They made it impossible to host a ceremony that typically brings 65,000 students, families, and friends to the USC campus, the school said. They was like, look, we can't fit all the people in here that we want to because these protests are going on. They're tiptoeing around it, saying, look, we didn't cancel it because she's going to say some stuff we don't want her to say. That's not why we canceled it. But that's clear that that's what they did, you know. They weren't very clear at any point with what the exact security concerns were. Student Jaden Ackerman said in an interview shortly after USC called off the ceremony. William Kimber, another student, expressed sympathy for all the graduates, especially since many would have missed their high school ceremonies in 2020 due to the pandemic. So these college students get no graduation, not in 2020, not in 2024. Especially since many, oh yeah, I just read that, due to the pandemic. He was also unconvinced by the school's rationale for canceling the ceremony. We provided a lot of funds and stuff before to protect, like Obama. Kimber said, referring to the former U.S. president, and now they can't provide the same protection for the students? It's kind of stupid. So the college students going crazy in the country, and it is what it is. But yeah, this is the nature of this, world that we live in, this kingdom that we live in here, Babylon the Great. All right. Amos 5:10, it says, they hate him that rebuketh in the gate, and they abhor him that speaketh uprightly. So they ain't even speaking in the laws of God. They're just saying, look, y'all shouldn't be murdering these innocent people. The state of Israel should not be murdering this innocent people. Y'all should not be funding this state that does this. And they still hate that. All right. And it's not even, coming out the scriptures. It's just, common sense. And they're like, well, you're going to do this. We're going to take your graduation away. Just like very silly, very silly. And Galatians 4, and what was it? Verse 16, I think it was. Yeah. Verse 16. Am I therefore become your enemy because I tell you the truth? You see that right there? So they hate people that tell them the truth. You become an enemy to this wicked world if you tell them the truth. All right. And again, this isn't even, they're not, the Palestinian protesters aren't even coming out the scriptures. They're just, telling what they observe, what they see to be factually accurate, right? The state of Israel is doing way too much. Y'all need to stop funding them. We're going to protest until you do. And they hate that thing. All right. They call in the police to shut them down. And they, they cancel the graduation ceremonies and all that kind of stuff. All right. Just to get back at them. All right. One other thing that I want to touch on, because this is, I don't know, man. It just seems kind of, obviously it's a sign of the times that all this is going on, but it's kind of strange. Obviously, Satan is doing something here to, what's the word I want to use here? Satan is doing something here for one means, but God is going to use it for a whole nother means. All right. So understand that thing. And I want to get to here. Let's see. So Satan is using this as a means to take away the rights of the people. And I've been stressing that, where you have rights in America until you don't. All right. They're probably off the back of these protests, and if not these protests, some other protests, saying, pass some sort of legislation saying, oh, people can't be out in the streets speaking against such and such. All right. So how they're going to use that? They're going to use that to crack down on people preaching the gospel. All right. Israelites is out in the streets. All right. So I want to read this here in Isaiah 30 and 20, just so we don't be discouraged. All right. And though the Lord give you the bread of adversity and the water of affliction. So the bread of adversity, obviously that's adversity. The water of affliction are tears that come from your trials. Yet shall not thy teachers be removed into a corner any more, but thine eyes shall see thy teachers. And thine ears shall hear a word behind thee, saying, this is the way, walk ye in it. When ye turn to the right hand and when ye turn to the left. So understand this thing. We got to be out here in the streets. All right. They already trying to shut people down based off, the worldly things of, being pro-Palestinian. We need to be out here in these streets preaching the gospel. All right. Even if they try to shut us down, even if and when they, throw hatred our way, we still got to keep going more and more out there with the love of God. All right. That is teaching his commandments. All right. So I just wanted to give that update and let people, let you know to be encouraged, stay encouraged. From there, I want to touch on Turkey. And I'm also going to touch on Canada. All right. So I want to touch on Turkey and I want to touch on Canada. It says Turkey halts trade Let me stop that. Turkey halts trade with Israel until permanent Gaza ceasefire. All right. So Turkey is getting involved. Turkey throws their hat in the ring, and they're saying, look, we can't support the state of Israel no more. I mean, we try to be friends with everybody. We try to be a part of the EU, right? We try to support, the West, quote unquote. We try to support the Edomites. We can't do it no more. All right. Turkey could not remain idle in the face of Israeli bombardment of defenseless Palestinians. That's an exact quote Erdogan said after Friday prayers. Israel says it's targeting militants hiding in residential areas. So, of course, the state of Israel says, we're not just bombing all these children for no reason. There's Hamas in there somewhere, probably. Of course, that's how they're going to frame it. But that's not what's happening. They're not just targeting individuals. They're bombing communities. That's what they're doing. And hospitals and things like that. All right. Erdogan later told Turkish business people that Ankara, that's the capital of Turkey, would manage problems stemming from this decision in coordination and dialogue with its business world, adding he believed this would serve as an example for other countries that are uncomfortable with the current situation, right? So Turkey is probably going to be the first of many countries to stop doing business with the state of Israel over this, all right? Or at least that's what they think is going to happen, all right? I want this to be known. We aren't chasing animosity or a fight with any country or any country in our region, Erdogan said, adding he was aware of how the West will attack us over the move. He said, look, I know America's going to be mad at us. I know Europe's going to be mad at us, but we can't aid the state of Israel no more. We can't do business with them when they're, genocidal maniacs, essentially. We have a single goal here to force the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu leadership, which has gotten out of control with the West's unconditional military and diplomatic support to a ceasefire, he added. He said, look, the West is continuing to support them. We can't. We don't want the blood on our hands, essentially what he's saying. Bolat said Turkey was in talks with Palestinian brothers on alternative arrangements to ensure that they are not affected by this decision. All right. Last month, Turkey curbed exports of steel, fertilizer, and jet fuel among 54 product categories over what it said was Israel's refusal to allow Ankara to take part in aid airdrop operations for Gaza. Right? Turkey wanted to help out. The state of Israel said, no, we ain't letting y'all in there. We ain't letting y'all help out. So Turkey said, all right, we're going to stop doing business with you. All right. The new ban covers all remaining trade, amounting to $5.4 billion in Turkish exports, or nearly 6% of all Israel's imports, and $1.6 billion in imports to Turkey last year. Right. So not only is Turkey not shipping anything out to the state of Israel no more, they're not receiving anything in from the state of Israel anymore. All right. Top Turkish exports to Israel are steel, vehicles, plastics, electrical devices, and machinery, while imports are dominated by fuels at $634 million last year, a Turkish trade data shows. All right. Wall Street Bank JP Morgan said the halt may marginally raise price pressures for goods in Israel in the short term, right? So prices are going to go up because they're not receiving as many products in. 4 Turkish exporters told Reuters the move blindsided them and left those with firm orders looking for ways to send goods to Israel via third countries. You see that right there? So the business people in Turkey said, look, we're still going to try to do this business, but, Turkey just kind of blindsided us with this. We didn't have a plan to reroute any of this. We're still trying to make this money, though. That's what them exporters said. Katz said blocking ports for Israeli imports and exports ignores trade deals, adding on social media platform X that Israel would work toward alternatives for trade with Turkey. And obviously Israel said, look, we still trying to be about our business too. I guess we'll go through third countries now instead of third-party countries, I should say. However, Meltem that's a name right there. Sarah Yoglu Scholar, professor at Marmara University's Faculty of Law, said the move is likely a legal countermeasure by Turkey against Israeli breaches of university accepted rules of humanitarian law in Gaza. Turkey has denounced Israel's military campaign in Gaza, sent thousands of tons of aid for Gazans, and this week said it would join South Africa's genocide case against Israel at the International Court of Justice. All right, so they're joining South Africa. All right, understand that thing. We've talked about it a lot. as far as the sides are forming that's going to be in this World War III. The whole reason why I'm bringing this out is because Turkey showed that they're not going to be standing with the state of Israel and America and the West. Turkey said, hey, we'd rather join with BRICS. BRICS being Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. All right, so they said, look, we're joining South Africa specifically. All right, in the ICJ. Israel denies committing acts of genocide in Gaza or violating humanitarian law there. Of course, they're going to try to make themselves the good guys, make themselves look like the good guys, even though they had openly admitted to bombing residential areas. Right, earlier in the article, it quoted that. Right, was that a quote or was that a paraphrase? Oh dang! I skipped the whole thing. Yeah. Yeah, I skipped the whole thing. Forgive me. I started. Where did I even start this at? Oh yeah, I did skip a little bit. Yeah, I believe I skipped this one right here where it said Israeli Foreign Minister Israel Katz criticized Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan's move enacted late on Thursday, saying it breaks international trade agreements and was how a dictator behaves, right? So they said Erdogan is a dictator because he doesn't do what we want. We're going to call him a dictator, all right? But, which, I was looking for something that said the residential area. Oh yeah, there we go. Yeah, so that was a paraphrase. Israel said it is targeting militants hiding in residential areas. That's what they've been saying. I'd have to find an exact quote, but that's what they've all been saying. Like the Minister of Defense, Netanyahu, that's what they've all been saying. All right. But anyway, it says a former Turkish diplomat, Sinan Olgan, and director of the Center for Economic and Foreign Policy Studies, said the move is widely backed by Turks, given the common opinion that the government's reaction toward Israel has been inadequate. Right, so they're moving in a way to please their own people instead of business interests. All right, that's how Erdogan is moving, at least to keep the support of the people. The Turkish Exporters Assembly said the country would have to trim year-end export targets toward 260 billion from 267 billion unless trade resumes with Israel in a couple of months. Exports to Israel are down 24% through April this year compared with 2023. Its data show. So it's going to affect their overall GDP, but hey, if they want to keep the favor of the people, and that's what we just read, that they're pretty much doing this to keep the favor of the Turkish people, because the Turkish people are not supporters of the state of Israel and what they're doing currently. All right, so we see Turkey joins the side of BRICS. So let me talk about this right here, just real quick, because this is just an update on something that we talked about on here before. We talked about it briefly, but here we have like the whole story basically. It says Canada police charged 3 with murder of Sikh leader Nijar and probe India link. Right, so they think there's a link to India in this case. All right. So from Ottawa today, Canadian police on Friday arrested and charged 3 Indian men with the murder of Sikh separatist leader Hardeep Singh Nijjar last year, and said they were probing whether the men had ties to the Indian government. You see that right there? So they believe that the Indian government was involved in killing this man who was a Sikh separatist. All right. Nijjar, age 45, was shot dead in June outside a Sikh temple in Surrey, a Vancouver suburb with a large Sikh population. A few months later, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau cited evidence of Indian government involvement, prompting a diplomatic crisis with New Delhi. You see that right there? So Canada and India are butting heads now, because Justin Trudeau is basically accusing them of assassinating this leader of a political movement. All right, a religious leader at that. All right. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police named the 3 men as Karenpreet Singh, Kamalpreet Singh, and Karan Brar. All right, all men in their 20s. We're investigating their ties, if any, to the Indian government. Mandeep Mukher, a RCMP superintendent, told a televised news conference. The Indian mission in Ottawa did not respond to requests for comment. Najjar, this is the point that I wanted to get to here. Najjar was a Canadian citizen campaigning for the creation of Khalistan, an independent Sikh homeland carved out of India. So that's the reason why India would want to have this man killed, is because India is mainly made up of Hindus, some Muslims, but also some Sikhs. All right. So this guy, Najjar, was a Canadian person, a Canadian citizen, who advocated for essentially a civil war in India. Advocated for, and perhaps he thought there would be some kind of vote to establish this, or perhaps he advocated for some sort of peaceful secession, but that's not how secession works. You know, you don't carve up a country by peace. That's not how it works. All right. Even if the people of the region would have voted, yeah, we want to secede. If India is anything like America, they would not let that happen. All right. If they're anything like any other huge country, any other first world country, I know India probably isn't first world. They're probably like second world. I don't think they're quite third world. But if they're anything like a first world country, they would not let that happen. Their countries these days are very protective of their lands, and they do not like secession. So this guy's essentially calling for a civil war in India. So naturally, if you are the government of India, you would want this guy gone, right? I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm saying, hey, there's could be some truth to this. All right. An independent Sikh homeland carved out of India. The presence of Sikh separatist groups in Canada has long frustrated New Delhi, which had labeled Najjar a terrorist, right? And that's what America, if there was somebody in, let's say, India or China, let's say there was somebody in China calling for California to be a different, or yeah, to secede and become its own country, America would call that person a terrorist. All right. So India viewed this Najjar guy as the same thing. All right. Again, I'm not saying that they're in the right and that Najjar was in the wrong, or that Najjar was in the right and India's in the wrong. Like how this World War III thing is shaping up to be. I've been saying it's evil on all sides. All right. That's why Christ is going to have to come back and judge everyone. All right. So Canadian police said they had worked with U.S. law enforcement agencies without giving additional details and suggested more detentions might be coming. This investigation does not end here. We are aware that others may have played a role in this homicide, and we remain dedicated to finding and arresting each one of these individuals, said Assistant RCMP Commissioner David Thibault. The trio, all Indian nationalists, were arrested in the city of Edmonton in Alberta on Friday, police said. They are due to arrive in British Columbia by Monday. So, whether the Indian government had a part to play in this or not, these three men have been confirmed to be Indian nationalists, as in they don't want to see their country split up into Khalistan and, a new India. They want to, keep the Sikhs in line, essentially, and that's what they viewed they were doing. So they murdered the guy. Now, obviously, that's not right, but they believed that they were doing that for their country. Trudeau announced in September that Canadian authorities were pursuing allegations linking Indian government agencies to the murder. New Delhi rejected Trudeau's claim as absurd. They said, no, we would never do that to this man who we definitely hated and considered a terrorist. We would never send somebody to take him out, right? We welcome the arrest, but this does lead to a lot more questions, said Balpreet Singh, a legal counsel and spokesperson for the Canada-based World Sikh Organization advocacy group. So obviously this Sikh guy, this guy who is a religious Sikh and probably wanted the same things as this Najjar man, he was like, look, there's probably some more to this. There's probably a lot more going on than what we see on the surface. Those who have been arrested are part of a hit squad. But it's clear that they were directed, he said by phone. He said, look, they didn't do this on their own. These were not some crazy Indian nationalists who were working alone. They were directed to do this by someone else. All right. Canada had been pressing India to cooperate in its investigation. Last November, U.S. authorities said an Indian government official had directed the plot and the attempted murder on U.S. soil of Gurpatwant Singh Panun, a Sikh separatist and a dual citizen of the U.S. and Canada. Right. So they said, look, India's tried something like this before. That's what the U.S. said. The U.S., hey, Canada called up the U.S., called up Big Bro and said, hey, look, can you help me out with this? And the U.S. was like, look, India's tried some stuff like this before. All right. While today's action is a step forward, it only scratches the surface, Panun said in a statement, calling for action to dismantle the networks that enable and perpetuate such crimes against Canadians on Canadian soil. Right. So why do I bring this up? Why do I bring this up? Why is this important? All right. Let's get to scripture. Because how do you think World War III gonna come about? Again, we see the sides forming. I just talked about BRICS and how Turkey has joined the side of the S in BRICS, right? South Africa, right? What are those other letters? Brazil, India, and China. All right, or rather Brazil, Russia, India, and China. All right, so we see India here. You know what side they're going to be on? They're part of BRICS. All right, and I read this a lot, but it's important that you know this and how this is going to turn out. All right, Revelation 16, I believe. Yes. All right, this is Revelation 16, starting with verse 14. I read this a lot. But it's important to understand what's going on here. The world is drawing the battle lines, all right? They're picking the sides, all right? It's coming down to the World War III. That's what it's coming down to. Obviously, Canada, especially in this case, going to be on the side of the U.S. Like I said, that's big bro to the Canadians. That's the U.S. Anytime that war falls out, Canada always on the side of the U.S., all right? India's on the opposing side, is on the BRICS side. This is just furthering the tensions. That's all this is doing. All right. Revelation 16, starting with verse 14. For they are the spirits of devils, working miracles, which go forth into the kings of the earth and of the whole world, to gather them to the battle of that great day of God Almighty. All right. So the kings of the earth and of the whole world is going to be gathered to that battle. All right. Behold, I come as a thief. Christ said, look, and when that battle starts, it could be any day. All right, so be prepared. Blessed is he that watcheth, and that's what we're doing right now, going over these topics. Watching, and keepeth his garments, lest he walk naked and they see his shame. So when it said that keepeth his garments, I haven't pulled this scripture in a little bit. I want to make sure y'all understand this. All right, Psalms. Where are the Psalms? All the way back here. Psalms 132. I want y'all to understand when it said keepeth his garments. What garments is it talking about? Psalm 132. And here we go, verse 9. Psalm 132, verse 9. Let thy priests be clothed with righteousness. Garments is clothing. Be clothed with righteousness. All right. And let thy saints shout for joy. All right. So clothed with the commandments, with the armor of God, so to speak. All right. It also says down here, verse 16, it says, I will also clothe her priests with salvations and with salvation, and her saints shall shout aloud for joy. You see that right there? We're going to be rejoicing in that day. The clothing that's talking about Revelation 16, the garments is the righteousness. Keep your righteousness, lest he walk naked and they see his shame. The same way that here in Exodus 32, let me get this real quick. Exodus 32. So keep the garments, keep the righteousness, lest they see your shame. Lest they see you naked and they see your shame. All right. So let's see. Let's Exodus 32. Yeah, verse 32 and verse 25. So this is going into, I'll just read this right here. No. This is all about the golden calf, right? When Moses was up in Mount Sinai, the people were worshiping a golden calf, an idol that Aaron had made for them. This is what Moses said. This is Exodus 32 and verse 25. And when Moses saw that the people were naked, they weren't literally naked. They had their clothes on and they were dancing around worshiping this idol. For Aaron had made them naked unto their shame among their enemies. You see that right there? So Aaron made them naked. He didn't take their clothes off. What he did was he allowed them to serve idols. He allowed them to break the commandments of God. And that means that they didn't have the garments anymore. They didn't have the righteousness anymore. They didn't have the armor of God anymore. All right. So that's what it's talking about when it says, keep his garments, keep your righteousness, lest he walk naked and they see his shame, unless you lose the protection from God. All right. And he gathered them together into a place in the Hebrew tongue, called in the Hebrew tongue Armageddon. All right. Armageddon is a place, and again, we've been through this so many times because this is what it's coming to. This is what it's all building up to. All right. And I use the same map just so everybody can see. All right. You see right here? Plain of Megiddo, Valley of Jezreel. That's Armageddon. All right. That's the most northern part of the West Bank in Israel. All right. That's where everybody's going to be fighting. That's where everybody's going to go to war. All right. So understand, when we talk about these conflicts between countries, when we talk about these disagreements between nations, that's what it's all building to. World War III. All right. I just want to point something else out real quick because we don't have that much time. I'll try to wrap it up fairly quickly. This is U.S. Representative Cuellar hit with bribery charges tied to Azerbaijan Mexican bank. All right. So we'll get into this. This is some corruption in the U.S. government. I know. Who would have suspected it, right? This was released today, or rather this article was posted today. U.S. Representative Henry Cuellar and his wife were indicted for allegedly accepting close to $600,000 in bribes in two schemes meant to benefit an Azerbaijani state-owned energy company and an unnamed bank based in Mexico, court papers showed, right? So they were taking money from Azerbaijan and sending it, or rather, you know, putting dirty money in banks in Azerbaijan, or rather investing in companies in Azerbaijan and putting the money in the bank in Mexico, and, you know, just doing a whole bunch of illegal stuff with money, right? Laundering money and things like that. All right, so it says the indictment returned by a grand jury on Tuesday and unsealed on Friday said the bribes were laundered through sham consulting contracts into shell companies owned by Imelda Cuellar, the congressman's wife, from December 2014 through at least November 2021. Right, so they started digging up dirt and files, and they could find stuff from 2014 to 2021. In exchange, it says Henry Cuellar sought to use his public position to influence U.S. foreign policy in Azerbaijan's favor and to pressure U.S. government officials to help the Mexican bank lobby against anti-money laundering enforcement policies and payday lending regulations that threatened its business, right? So that's, I'm not going to act like he's unique in this. That's what all government officials do. So why this guy? Why pin this guy? We'll get to that later. Before the charges were unsealed, Cuellar issued a statement denying the allegations. Both my wife and I are innocent of these allegations, said Cuellar. One of the most conservative Democrats in the House of Representatives, Cuellar is seeking an 11th two-year term in the November 5th election. He represents a Texas district that borders Mexico and includes Laredo and parts of San Antonio, right? So he's a representative from one of the border counties, all right, in Texas. Yeah, on Friday, a spokesperson for Democratic House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries said Cuellar would be stepping down as the ranking member of the Homeland Security Appropriations Subcommittee while the case is pending, right? So this guy, he was up there, man. He was not just, you know, somebody in the back. He was he had other positions as well, right? He had a special position on, what was that, the Homeland Security Appropriations Subcommittee. Cuellar's home and campaign office in Laredo were searched by federal law enforcement in January of 2022 when Cuellar served as a co-chair of the Congressional Azerbaijan Caucus. Right, so again, this guy's been there for a while. He had 11 terms, each one being 2 years. Yeah, or rather, he's seeking his 11th. He's been there for 10 terms. He's been there for a while. All right, this ain't just some George Santos that just walked off the street. All right, he's been there for a while. All right. In that capacity, he and several other members of Congress signed a letter urging Congress to provide humanitarian support to assist people displaced following the war between Azerbaijan and Armenia. Right? So this shows you what happens whenever these government officials push for humanitarian support. Right? So this guy was probably getting some humanitarian support and then putting it in his bank, right? Or investing it in his, energy company that he's got, money tied up in Azerbaijan, right? The indictment cited Cuellar's support for providing funding to Azerbaijan and a pro-Azerbaijan speech he gave on the House floor, among other among other actions, right? So I mean, it's like I said, anytime that Congress is looking for humanitarian support, be wary. All right, and just like a lot of these charities, well-known charities here in America, the CEO will be making millions of dollars. Most of what you will be donating is going to the CEO's fund. All right. And how the Clintons, Hillary specifically, I think she set up her brother over the Haiti relief fund back when there was an earthquake in Haiti. They ended up stealing all that money. All right. Yeah, Hillary's still out and about. Bill, he's still out and about, right? They're not under the jail. They're not facing any charges. So what's up with this guy, right? Cuellar said in his statement he had sought legal advice from the House Ethics Committee and a national law firm. We requested a meeting with the Washington, D.C. prosecutors to explain the facts, and they refused to discuss the case with us or to hear our side. He said they wouldn't even hear me out. They wouldn't even hear me out. You see, what had happened was, no, they wouldn't even none of that, all right? The Justice Department said Cuellar and his wife made initial appearances before a federal magistrate judge in Houston on Friday. They were released on bond, all right? So they did get out. They got bailed out. Each faces 14 counts on charges, including, so this is both of them. They face 14 counts of conspiracy, bribery, honest services, wire fraud, being a public official acting as an agent of a foreign principal, and money laundering, right? So they throwing the book at them, right? Several of the charges carry a statutory maximum of 20 years in prison, right? So they could give them, each of those charges, give them 20 years. They could end up with, the rest of their lives in prison. Probably not, but they could, all right? Cuellar is not the only member of Congress facing federal charges. So just check this out. He's not the only member of the government, specifically Congress, facing federal charges. Democratic Senator Bob Menendez is awaiting trial on corruption charges in New York, while Republican George Santos last year was expelled from the White House, was expelled from the House of Representatives, while he awaits trial on charges of violating campaign finance laws. Both Menendez and Santos deny wrongdoing, right? So it's Democrats and Republicans, all right? It's not just like, all those evil Democrats are being exposed or those fascist Republicans, those corrupt. No, it's both sides, right? But notice who it is. It's Cuellar, Menendez, and Santos. What do these people have in common? And am I sitting here saying, this is white people attacking the Latinos. The Latinos are innocent and they are being unjust? No. They more than likely did it, all right? Am I saying that, the Latinos are just more corrupt than the whites? No. White people, they've been doing this forever, all right? The money laundering stuff that goes in Congress, they've been doing this forever. But why is it that it's only happening to the Latinos, that they're facing the charges? They're being found out about this. And it's the same thing with Tiffany, I forget her name, but the mayor in Chicago. Or not in Chicago, the mayor in a suburb of Chicago, right? doing all these, things with the people's money and immediately being found out about it? Is it that old white men ain't doing the same thing? Of course they are, right? So why is it that only blacks and Latinos are being found out about these crimes that they're committing, right? All right, let's go to Amos 3. Because these aspiring politicians who are black and Latino, they see white people doing this stuff all the time, and they say, oh, that's a good lick. I'm gonna hit a lick. I'm gonna come up, right? I'm gonna do the same type of corruption stuff. I'm gonna do the same type of wicked stuff that white people do, and I'm gonna get away with it. That's not how it works. That's not how it works. All right? This here in Amos 3, starting with verse 1. Hear this word that the Lord has spoken against you, O children of Israel, against the whole family which I brought up from the land of Egypt, saying. So this is all the children of Israel. This ain't just Southern Kingdom. This ain't just the blacks. This ain't just the Latinos, right? It's all 12 tribes, all right? You only have I known of all the families of the earth. Therefore, I will punish you for all your iniquities. You see that right there? So God dealt with the Israelites in such a way where we can't do all the wickedness that the other nations do. God will expose us first and quickly. He will not let us get away with it. All right? God dealt with us in a different way. He said, look, I've only known you, so I'm only going to punish you. That's just how it works. You can be mad if you want to. That's what the scriptures say. All right? Now, does that mean white people ain't going to be judged? Of course they will. Just like the Canaanites was judged eventually. All right? But with the other nations, God does not treat them the way that he treats us because, again, he has a special relationship with us. He expects something from us. He don't expect nothing from them. So he just lets all their sin build up until he can't take it no more. With us, it's a little bit of sin. He said, okay, I'm going to judge you for that. All right? Immediately, right? The same way that... let's say in the world, right? Let's use a fleshly example. Let's use an earthly example. If let's say you're a parent and you have kids, right? You will punish your kids for whatever they do wrong, right? You'll discipline your kids for whatever they do wrong. Somebody else's kids, you don't necessarily punish them. You just gotta wait until they grow up and commit a crime before they get their punishment. Because a lot of people, kids, they don't punish their kids. They just let them get away with whatever. And you can't punish their kids because they're not your kids. It's the same way. Same way with God. God don't punish other people's immediately because they're not his children. He doesn't have that relationship with them. All right? A lot of people are going to get mad about that. I don't care. That's what the scriptures say. All right? Check this out. This is Deuteronomy 8. I was reading this earlier today. Deuteronomy 8. What verse is it? So this is talking about when the Israelites came up out of the wilderness, right? Came up out of Egypt, went into the wilderness. Let's see. Where are we at? Here we go. So this is, I'm gonna start with verse 1 and read down through verse 6. All the commandments which I command thee this day shall you observe to do, that you may live and multiply and go in and possess the land which the Lord sware unto your fathers. And thou shalt remember all the way which the Lord thy God led thee these 40 years in the wilderness, to humble thee and to prove thee, to know what was in thy heart, whether thou wouldest keep the commandments or no, right? Because we wasn't supposed to go through the wilderness for 40 years initially, but that first generation was wicked. They didn't want to serve God. So God said, look, I might have to get rid of y'all and I'm just going to use y'all's kids instead. All right. And he had to prove that generation of children to see if they would listen to him, which all praise to the Most High, that next generation did. And he humbled thee and suffered thee to hunger and fed thee with manna, which thou knewest not, neither did thy fathers know, that he might make thee to know that man doth not live by bread only, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of the Lord doth man live, right? So God had to show the people, look, yeah, you fasted for a few days, but you got to know that I was never going to let you die. I got to let you know, look, you got to live by the word of God. It's not just about the food or the water. You got to live by the word of God. All right. Thy raiment Check this out. It says, thy raiment wax not old upon thee. So the people's clothes, you might think, well, how'd they go through the 40 years? Never changed clothes. Their clothes didn't get old. Thy raiment wax not old upon thee. Neither did thy foot swell. You think, well, I was walking around the desert for 40 years. My feet would be rough. Their feet didn't get rough, right? Because God was with them. These 40 years. Thou shalt also consider in thy heart that as a man chasteneth his son, so the Lord thy God chasteneth thee. You see that right there? So that's how God did with his people, like a man does his son. That's why I use that example. All right. The Lord chastens his people, so-called Latinos, the way that he does his son. All right. The way that he does, or rather that a man does his son. Right. So it's the same, like I said, it's the same thing with that sister in, I forget the name of that city, but that corrupt mayor, Tiffany, whatever her name is, all right? There's a lot of people who's dogging her. She's really just doing the same thing that everybody else is doing, all right? But since she's an Israelite, she's going to get exposed for it, all right? Now, part of that, sure, may be, you know, some racist Edomites who want to, you know, just focus on what quote unquote people of color are doing wrong. Sure, there may be some of that, but God is using it for his purpose. Understand that. All right. Everything that everyone does, God has a meaning behind it. All works toward the good of God's people. All right. Therefore, thou shalt keep the commandments of the Lord thy God to walk in his ways and to fear him. Understand that. Understand that thing. That's what it's all about. It's all about serving God. So just to reiterate this point, I'm closing out here with Psalms 147. Don't want you to forget the point about how God deals with his people. All right. Psalm 147, starting with verse 19. Psalm 147, starting with verse 19. He showed his word unto Jacob, his statutes and his judgments unto Israel. That's the so-called blacks, Latinos, and American Indians here in the West. It's also so-called Oceanians, South Asians, people over there in the East, and the dispersed throughout Africa, Asia, and Europe, of course. But God showed his word unto Jacob, his statutes and his judgments to Israel. He hath not dealt so with any nation, right? So God didn't deal with the Edomites like that. He didn't deal with the Ishmaelites like that, the Moabites like that. All right, so on and so forth. All right. He has not dealt so with any nation. And as for his judgments, they have not known them. So the other nations, they don't know what it's like to go through the curses of Deuteronomy. All right. They will. As the prophecy foretells, when we get our stuff together, they're going to have to go through the curses. But since we won't do the commandments, we'll never know what it's like to be prosperous. God will not let us prosper without following him. That's how he operates. All right. And the world will never get back on track until we get back on track. All right. That's just how it works. All right. The whole world is out of course. All right. It says that in Psalms 82. He called us gods, but we dying like men because we won't do what he says. All right. That's what Revelation 7 is all about. When Christ said specifically, look, I will not judge the earth until my chosen wake up. And he starts listing all the tribes in Revelation 7. All right. He hath not dealt so with any nation. And as for his judgments, they have not known them. Praise ye the Lord. Right. So David said all praise to the Most High for that thing, that the other nations don't know what it's like to serve God. All praise to the Most High for that thing. They don't know what it's like to be under the curses. All praises to the Most High for that. We got a special relationship with God. All praises to the Most High for that thing.